All right, we're back from our recess, and now we're ready to begin on 9.6, which is the request authorization to pursue funding from the Board of Commissioners in July to add 6 classrooms to the new Odell Elementary School. Mr. Louder will be presenting.
I don't have anybody hit me in the back now. I'm, as we talked about last week a little bit, we are obviously presently building Odell Elementary. It's our secondary school, or ages 3 through 5. The school was built in a layout that allows us to have future expansions when the need arises. I know y'all did some redistricting last month, and that sort of things. And in doing so, we started looking at that district and realized that based on the growth projections of that district, we may exceed capacity at the Royal Oak Secondary School within a couple years after construction is complete.
Odell.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's been a long, yeah, I'm sorry.
I know how you feel.
Okay, Odell. I apologize.
The listening audience, not to
Odell.
confused.
I'm talking about Odell now. I'm sorry. Odell. And in doing so, we thought it might be prudent to look at maybe the option during construction, as it will be much cheaper to add those classrooms during the existing construction process rather than wait and complete the school and then come back 2 years from now and try to do it then. And in doing so, we did some crunched some numbers, talked to the contractors, talked to the architects, and came up with a dollar figure around $1.3 million, including furnishings and technology. I do apologize we didn't change the number in the top of it, $1.29 million, but the actual revised number is $1.315 million, and I think the schedule that you have attached to it does show the $1.315 million. So I just didn't change the title. That's my fault. But in doing so, we're asking for you to consider that concept and allow us to go to Cabarrus County to ask them if there might be some possible funding allowing us to go ahead and move forward with adding those 6 additional classrooms at this time during the construction process. And if they obviously say yes, then we'll obviously come back to you to get that approval to do so. But the funding obviously is the first thing we have to go after.
Thank you. Board members, before we begin discussion, I just want to let you know I had a conversation with Commissioner Morris this afternoon about this, that we would be coming forward so there would be no surprises. And tomorrow we have a chair-vice chair meeting, and we'll talk about it a little bit more. But he said if we were to present something like this, he said he would like to have the evidence that says that, we did, Ms. Gomez did a 4-year build-out of that, of what the population of the school would look like, so you might want to resurrect that and provide that in a paper format so you can hand it out to the commissioners. Absolutely. So that it helps support not only the pricing, but why are we asking for this, and where was this, how far is the school going to go over and above its capacity at the 800 level. Absolutely. So that would be something that they would want to make sure they had in hand so they could talk about it, and then it's just a matter of weighing that against all the other priorities we have. So, board members, I'll turn it over to you for questions to Mr. Louder. Yes, ma'am.
No, I always.
Yeah, well, I was waiting for you to raise your hand.
You were waiting for me. The only, I know the technology part you'd have to go ahead and do, and some of the stuff you would have to go ahead and do. But the only thing, it's 2 years out for the children to be in, possibly there. Would we have to buy the furniture for them to? I know you'd eventually have to get it, but if the children, if their backsides aren't going to be in the seats, do we have to have the seats there?
The answer to that is no, but I don't want to come into this process and tell you that this will be your total cost without furnishings. Obviously, if we decide to do it, the furnishings are part of the total cost of the project. Now, whether we delay those to buy them 1 year from now, or 18 months from now, or 2 years from now, that's fine. That's something we work out with the county. But I just want to make sure that you're aware of the total cost of the project before we went into the process.
But maybe they could budget it,
Yes,
a year or 2 years from now. But what I'm saying is, we keep asking and asking, and we're asking so much for the schools anyway. I'm just saying maybe that would save some money. I don't know exactly how much the furniture would cost. Maybe I was, it says equipment, furniture, they're showing, is that $825? But that may be the total.
Yes.
I don't know how much it is for just that portion. Do you know how much it is for just that portion?
The F&E was $63,000,
Oh, 60, see, I'm looking at the
and
total.
IT is $31,000.
You need to go to the other, there's another, go back to your board docs. There's another.
If you remember, there's a couple of reasons I think why we should go ahead and purchase the furniture.
Well, I mean, we could save some on it, but.
Well, initially, yes, but if it gets deeded back to the Board of Ed and we don't get to take advantage of that state tax refund, then that's one additional small revenue stream that we kind of miss out on. Also, when you're building a building, the furniture comes from the construction budget, and if you close out that budget.
I'm sorry, Mr.
We're
Power. just trying to
technology challenged
orient.
here, I'm sorry. I'll let Kelly finish.
I'm sorry. He was trying to find the amount, 63.
Mr.
So
Louder,
I mean, if it's not a big advantage to us, but I thought, well, maybe it possibly would be.
Mr. Louder,
Yes.
What is the maximum dining capacity of the existing design? And how will these additional 6 classrooms impact that dining capacity?
Right now, we have a design student capacity of 150 children below dining capacity. The core is built for 150 kids more than the classroom space we're building into, as we do in most all schools, allowing us for expansion. What we will do by adding these classrooms, we will basically match classroom to dining capacity.
So they'll be very close, it'll be very
The same
tight.
at 1,000 each.
So in this proposal to add 6 new classrooms, we're not in effect adding any additional dining capacity?
No, sir. The dining capacity is already built into the construction we're doing now.
Shouldn't we?
Well,
Shouldn't
built
we
it in.
expand the dining capacity now while we're talking about adding 6 new classrooms so that we have some real capacity later on and aren't, I don't mean to throw another monkey wrench in, but...
Mr. Harrison,
Yes, sir.
it's already there. The core was designed for 1,000 students.
Mm-hmm.
We only added enough classrooms to support 800, so we still had plenty of core capacity left in the school to go to 1,000. Now, if he adds these 6 classrooms, that will carry us up to the core capacity of the school. So you just add additional classrooms to get us to the 1,000. So we already had the 1,000 capacity in the hallways and cafeteria and the gymnasium and
Administration.
the media center and that type of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. We do that on almost every school we build. We build a core, just like we're doing at Mount Pleasant. Obviously, we have a core of 800.
Mhm.
They have, that's what we try to do, to build that core capacity in for allowing for that future expansion. We're just allowing that future expansion to happen very, very near future rather than in 4 or 5 years down the road.
Mr. Walter?
I might add, too, that the cost is $1.3 million and adding 150 seats. So the cost per student for adding them at this time is less than $100 per student. Or, I'm sorry, $1,000 per student. I did the math wrong there. But so that bottom line is that is much cheaper than we're actually having to deal with on the main construction of the site. It was costing almost $20 million for the 850 kids.
So the cost right now is $21 million without this expansion, or with? And
About $20,500,000.
21,500?
20,000.
You posted that, correct.
20.
Does that include the road improvement? So
Yes.
that does include the road improvement. So we're at 21,524,000.
Let me go back to board docs. This is right here, isn't it?
And then we want another 1.3 million on this?
Yeah.
Push it up, make it bigger. We have 21,228, and then we have in contingency.
That's including this construction.
So we have 21,228,772 budgeted, but we also had the $307,000 in contingency that's held at the county. Of that, we've used 11,400, so there's 295,600 of contingency at the county.
And that was a pretty small contingency comparatively. I think we've
Right.
done a bare bones thing just to get the 21 million because we were afraid to ask the county for additional monies, and we ended up asking them for additional monies, and they gave it to us. I just don't think that this is granted there's a cost savings, and I see that. But I don't see this as a time to be asking for another $1.3 million to add more capacity at that school, and it's going to open up at one of those estimates, if I can find that. I mean, one of the estimates was going to open up at 80% capacity. And we have schools on the other side of the county that we're going to be asking for money for with Hickory Ridge and especially with Central Cabarrus with that listing that you guys presented here that says we're anticipating being 116% capacity at Central. I mean, that's where our priority ought to be. We need to be focusing on what can we do to relieve that overcrowding now, and it's going to be worse in 4 years, than to worry about the school. I know, granted, the school is going to grow, and it's a big growing area. But I think as far as our priorities, I think that's why that 10-year plan was so important, to present that to the county and say, hey, these are the priorities. This is where we're asking the funding instead of coming to them, well, yeah, we want another million for this or we want another million here. So I am not in favor of this at this time.
What did you have for the population of the 3.5 in 2016, Rob, when it opens?
I think, what was this, 3.5? And again, this is older numbers, but it says that the Odell, was it 3, opening up at 589? Is that right? And the other,
That doesn't sound correct at all.
and the other one was 613, and that was after, because we were only moving a smaller group of students. We didn't move that entire area. We reduced the amount we were moving over to Odell.
Yeah, she had it at 772 for the 3.5 on May 6th.
That was a capacity number, I think.
No, okay. Yes, capacity. And I had it at 93% was on May 6th is what Joe told me. It was at 93% at that point. I don't know how much it dropped off when we did the redistricting and didn't include North Chase. And
Yeah,
I don't know if Skybrook wasn't a part of that at that point.
that was a big difference, I think. Anyway, I don't think it's going to open up near the 90%. It's going to get there. I mean, obviously that area is growing and it's going to be there. But what is the priority right now?
Well, and this was all predicated on the 550 home development Quail, whatever, I don't know what the other part of it
Quail
is. What is it?
Quail Haven was originally
Quail
called.
Haven, yeah. And Ms. Gomez did an estimate of a 4-year build-out on that, and that's where she came up with these numbers. And by 2019, her numbers reflected that the 3.5, which is the one we're building right now, was going to be at 123% capacity. Now, we could get her to run the numbers again, and you could do that, and then
That's 123% of the current building capacity, not
right, of the
not the
772.
expansion.
So it would be 123% of 772, which you'd multiply by 123, and that'll give you what that new population would be, which is close to
1,000.
the 1,000 number. So that was by 2019. Then you estimated the cost of the new construction would be double if we were to go out and just have someone mobilize and rebuild those classrooms later on. Was that what you were estimating, about 2.2,
Well, if we
2.3?
move it 3 years down the road and redesign on-site, rebid it on-site, remobilize and everything like that, it could be significantly higher, probably in the $2 million plus range for those same classrooms.
So do I take that to mean, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, that we would be saving the county $700,000, $1 million to build these 6 classrooms now compared to a few years down the road to tear down a wall to add 6 classrooms at the price of construction several years in the future?
And that's part of our motivation to talk about it now, because right now we have a window of opportunity, it'll be a rather narrow window of opportunity, but we are under construction, and the contractor is on site. and we can add it to that site now at a more economical level than we can 2 years or 3 years down the road. So, it doesn't have to happen. We will open below capacity, but it is an opportunity for a savings, a significant savings over a 3-year period if we decide to go now versus wait.
Because we know absolutely certain that that area is going to continue to grow.
By
I
all
mean,
projections,
by-
both with the
by
county
common
and that sort of
sense,
thing,
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
see it not growing, sir.
Yeah, it is going to continue to have needs.
There was, in the construction committee meeting, there was just a brief kind of comment or suggestion of possibly doing some minor redesign of the existing building while we add these classrooms. And I think we kind of nixed that right away and just kind of figured that we need to just focus on building the classrooms. And so, so that 1.3 is really on the high end, it seems like, from the estimates based on just kind of adding those expenses back into the project. So it could be much less, 10% cheaper than the 1.3 with some savings there. So there's no plan to redesign any of the current building just to add the additional 6 classrooms. Okay.
Let me add one quick thing.
Yes, sir.
If we don't do it now or ask for it now, then in 2-3 years, Commissioner's going to be saying, why didn't y'all ask for this 3 years ago when you already knew that? So I think the common sense thing is to go ahead and let's do it while it's cheaper.
Mr. Morris and I had the discussion today, and he said the exact same thing you did. He said, look, he said, we may not approve it, but he said, at least you're on record for asking for it. But he said, make sure you supply the reasons why you're asking for it. And part of it's the population, part of it's the fact that we will inflate the price of the building if we have to come back in, and because we'll have to do some design work, because now you'll have to deal with as-built rather than, and so you have to get your as-built up, and they have to do some, Mosley or somebody will have to do redesign on the structure, and then you'll have to remobilize, and so those are all come with extra costs.
And again, you're also working on a site that's housing children.
Right.
So, and with limited access now because you're having to work around your existing traffic and your existing patterns and that sort of thing. So those are, just overall general constructability, if you will, was the best way to say that. It's a big problem.
Are you ready for a motion?
I'm ready for a motion, if I can get one.
Move to approve.
Mr. Powell would like to make a motion. And second it. And Mr. Phillips will second it. All right, any more discussion?
Sorry, what is the motion?
Move to approve. I said move to approve, and he said good enough.
It's a move to approve pursue the funding.
Pursue the funding for 1.3.
And I still don't think we should be doing these piecemeal. I think we should have a plan. Granted, there's some savings to it, but I'd rather see that money go towards land for New Royal Oaks or land or something over at Central that addresses a big overcrowding need right now.
All right. Board members,
I
are
agree
you ready
with
to
Mr.
vote?
Walter 100% and all of those, which will not impact how I vote, but I agree with him.
All right, board members, we have a motion before us to pursue the funding for the $1.3 million to present to the BOC related to the new Odell Elementary School. All in favor of this motion, say aye. Aye. Oppose? No. All right, so the motion carries, and it's 6-1 with Mr. Walter dissenting. All right, now we'll move on to our next item, 9.7, Policy 7440. And before us, we had, last meeting, we looked at this policy, and Mr. Powell had put in, and you can see it on your agenda, it's in red. He wanted to add this particular paragraph. So, Mr. Powell, did you like to carry on?
Yes, I'll read it for everyone. This is, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the reassignment, transfer policy. It was down in the agenda. We had some heavy hitting items on the agenda, but the policy is pretty good. But in my experience, even the best policy can create maybe some small gaps that that occur over time. And, there's been some discussion, I guess you could say, some email discussion back and forth regarding this policy, and some questions asked and answered, and we've gotten information back from staff and so forth. But I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but I did like when Ms. Reimer read it, so I'm going to go ahead and read it. School-based employees who are transferred involuntarily from one school to another to satisfy increases or decreases in student enrollment will be given priority for returning to the previous school when the next available position is made available through attrition, increased enrollment, or by a change in student programming. Employees may only be eligible for returning to their school if they are in good professional standing when they left or upon returning and meet all qualifications for the available job. In other words, it's basically a pathway back. If we force them to move, then we just give them a pathway back, since they were essentially hired or advertised from a school and then hired to do that job at that school. But the more I thought about this, from a principal's perspective, and we've talked a little bit about flexibility for the principal. In this district, there is nothing more sacred. I don't know if we have a lot of principals in the room. We do. Sacred than an open vacancy. And you can probably understand why that's so sacred, because in this district, they don't happen very often. And that's a very good thing. So when we get an open vacancy, those principals really they want to hold on to that vacancy. And at times, and I think if you ask any principal, they'll tell you that open vacancies are not a given thing. HR, for a variety of reasons, will come in and fill that vacancy. So it's really kind of a placeholder, and they sort of hold their breath to be able to fill that vacancy, because every principal would like to have the opportunity to hire from outside their own school, and so they have some input into that vacancy. Well, in this policy, there's no loss of flexibility, because in this policy, this thing that we hold so sacred is going to get filled by another principal over here that also holds that vacancy just as sacred. So in this policy, since we're telling somebody to go because of all the reasons that are really valid, enrollment is down, or we changed programming, or all of these compliance issues possibly, they're certainly valid. And I don't think this policy, the changes that I've recommended, they don't change those. I mean, we'll still have the right to move. Is that correct? We'll still maintain the right to move employees based on all of these valid reasons. Is that correct? The only thing...
Yes.
Okay. The only thing that this policy does, I think, is move that sacred vacancy. And it just allows that employee the pathway back. Now, there's been talk about performance-related moves and that kind of thing, but they're still in our district, and they're district employees. And all it does is move that vacancy from one school to the other. And if you think about it, that vacancy was created at one school anyway, and it was filled based on allotments and so forth. So it's really just kind of a passing of the vacancy and then a passing back of the vacancy. And so, you're kind of taking the vacancy away from one principal when you move the person, and then you're sort of taking the vacancy away from the same principal when you move them back. So that's basically what this boils down to, I think. And, we want to maintain as much flexibility as we can with principals, but when you're moving one vacancy for another, I think we're just shifting the flexibility. We're not really gaining or losing. It's a zero-sum flexibility. All we're doing is really empowering that teacher to say, we're sorry. Allotments didn't work out. We didn't have as many kindergartners as we had fifth graders. But by virtue of this policy, we're going to give you a pathway back when the vacancy occurs. So that's basically, I think, what it boils down to for me.
Board members, are there any comments?
Ms. Reimer? No.
Anybody else have any comments on this policy?
Well, I'll just say real quick, I mean, when I first read this, it seemed kind of common sense-ish, but then when we did get feedback from the principals, I thought that they had some legitimate concerns, and I do feel that there actually already is a pathway back for employees that get involuntarily transferred. There is a transfer process that we go through at the end of each year. So I think the flexibility is already there, and so I'm not in favor of making this change now that I've received the feedback from our principals.
Anyone else want to weigh in?
And that
Ms.
was my
Carpenter?
only concern, because I know that we do have that transfer thing that we do at the end of the year. And that was my only question, is why are these people that you're referring to, why are they not jumping on board if they had a problem and they got caught in this, switch over? Why are they not jumping on board at the end of the year? If they got caught in that, where maybe say they were at Mount Pleasant, and they got caught in the downsizing because of a decrease in enrollment, and they put them over at Boger. Why did they not jump on board when asking for transfers back at the end of the year? Because that's what I'm understanding to be the pathway back.
The Mount Pleasant Elementary principal didn't want them back. They hired them, they recommend hiring them, and they were probably happy that employee left. And so, in my opinion, that turns into more of a performance issue than it does an allotment issue. And if I were that person and I got moved because of allotment issues, and then was forced to interview back at the school, that's kind of a demeaning process. I think you were hired there once, but then you have to re-interview for the position, and it's clear that it was a performance issue at that point. So that's why the principal doesn't want them back. The principal is kind of able to move away from that staff member, and so now we've moved that staff member to Boger in your example, and we've put an undue burden on them. To me, I would say that we denied them due process because it was a performance issue. Why they didn't get rehired or whatever, it's not hired because they're already an employee, but I would say that that's kind of a slippery slope. In essence, we turned that allotment issue into a performance issue, and it just doesn't feel right to me. We didn't do right by that employee if we don't allow them to come back and address those performance issues at the original hiring school. And I think the general practice is we don't transfer if they have deficient performance, which I don't think is any different than not allowing them back. So that's the gap that has been created. There is no pathway back if the principal or the school, which principals could change, just decides not to. In that regard, in that scenario, that vacancy is more important to one principal than another, and this policy would really eliminate that and just allow the employee to have some say in being able to come back.
You're basically telling me some people are using then this as not using it that properly then, and this is where our superintendent needs to make sure that everyone's using that properly then. Superintendent?
Well, but in the same vein, if the principal of the receiving school had several candidates, and one of them happened to be the involuntary displaced candidate, and that principal found someone that they thought was a better personality fit for the school, which, there's some intangibles that go with hiring people, and they thought that the person that they had before didn't seem to fit the personality of the school the way his leadership was working. It's not so much a performance issue, it's more of a personality issue, and that's part of the leadership process of establishing leadership at a school. So that could happen, and that person may not be brought back for a number of different reasons. When you're asking a principal to make a decision on his team, then he has or she has the flexibility of making that decision based on the entire person, not just pure performance, pure this, pure that. They're looking at the complete fit and how does this person interact with their team. I think that this particular policy really ties Dr. Louder's and his leadership's hands, in that now Ms. Jones and her group will have to maintain a record of every single involuntary person and where their pathway back, and every time we displace someone from one school to another, there'll have to be a scorecard. Are they available to come back to this school? When do they get to come back? And then there needs to be a horizon. How long do they have involuntary return rights? And are those return rights a 2-year, 3-year, or is it indefinite, to when it's offered? So I think that there's a slippery slope of maintaining a lot of records that I think really burdens Dr. Louder and his staff in trying to keep up with involuntary moves when they occur for so many different reasons. And when employees are hired at our school system, they're hired on as Cabarrus County Schools. You happen to be located here, and so when you look at the conditions of employment, the condition of employment is I am hired on as an employee of Cabarrus County Schools, and I work where Cabarrus County Schools will need me to work, and that's the only thing that I'm guaranteed when I'm hired on. That's the way I would view it, and so I'm not in favor of this particular paragraph being added.
I'm gonna make one quick comment, and it doesn't relate to an individual, but if you look at it athletically, if you have a teacher that had to go to another school and you got one there, and that teacher wanted to come back, if I got a teacher on staff that's coaching 2 or 3 sports, and that person that left can't coach a sport or can't do beta, after school activities for clubs and stuff, then you're stuck. And I know Ms. Reimer could speak to this, is filling those kind of positions when you're trying to hire a teacher coach. That's hard. There's not that many of them. There are not many spots for them. So to me, it would and it could tie your hands in that process.
I don't know about y'all, but I know someone who was downsized from the recent Bank of America decision. And for that individual, there ain't no path back. We're talking about involuntary movement, but in effect, it's a mechanism that helps an individual keep a job. It may be an involuntary movement, but it is an effort to keep their services and their talents and retain their employment within the system. The involuntariness of the whole situation was based on, again, programmatic changes, reduction in enrollment, something outside of the realm of what was manageable. What we're trying to do here is to keep people in the system as it is, and I'm afraid that this policy proposal is an artificial way of micromanaging the superintendent and the principal's responsibility.
All right, do I have a motion for this policy? I'll take one either way.
I move we accept
All right,
the teacher-friendly policy in red on 7440. Teacher-friendly policy. Well, I'm a teacher advocate. I can't help it. And, you know, to hear that we're giving principals flexibility, I guess my analogy of a vacancy going from one school to the other didn't really do its job. But and that's okay. But if we send an employee away for allocation and then don't allow them back for performance, I think what we've done is created we've denied them due process, because they don't have the ability to modify their performance to be able to get back. And this is not an issue in middle school and high school. We've seen the numbers. It never has been. Those numbers work out. There's so much more flexibility, it seems. It seems to be a elementary school issue that has been here for several years. But anyway, that's just my thought. I move we accept.
Do I have a second to this motion? All right, I don't have a second, so that motion dies. So I do need a motion to accept the policy 7440 as originally written. No
Actually, I
change?
don't think you do, because, I mean,
Oh,
that's
okay.
the existing policy. This was a proposal to add the
amend the
red
policy?
language.
Okay.
So I think if that fails, the policy hasn't changed. It just remains the way it
All right,
is.
so the motion fails and policy 7440 stays as written. All right, now I need a motion for us to convene in closed session.
I make a motion, we go in closed session.
Tim Furr seconded that. All in favor of convening? Oh, yeah, I'm going to read all of this. Pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11A3, to consult with an attorney, etc. General Statute 143-318.11A6, to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, etc. of a public officer or employee. And pursuant to General Statute 115C-319 through 321. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? All right, motion carries. We are now in closed session.